Outer Orange. Hello and welcome to another video. Welcome back, guys, to probably me not making content in a hot minute, so sorry that's been a while. I actually randomly decided to take a trip to Chicago, and well, here we are. Come back with the top. I am here today to discuss the top 8 deck profile that I took for Sea Maidens. We're gonna break it down. We're gonna definitely talk about the deck profile. We're gonna do some shout outs, all that stuff. The rounds will probably be towards the end. I'll probably bring that up, all that kind of stuff. So that being said, let's just shout out a couple people real quick. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to Yellow, who has been testing with me and kind of just showing me the ropes, kind of supporting me throughout all this as I randomly decided to go to Chicago, literally out of nowhere, exactly 2 weeks ago. It was a very last minute decision. So thank you for supporting me. I also want to thank Sakib. He is the second place winner that went to BCS Georgia. He mirror tested with me pretty much a lot, so just to get the mirror match down of Steam Maidens, which is a very important part of me just being able to compete and deal with these mirror matches, right? So thank you so much, Sakib. Thank you also Crow. Crow gave me some advice as well for the Steam Maidens, kind of some little things to kind of keep track of, things to kind of keep in mind. Thank you Noman also for just being very supportive and very helpful. Thank you also to Matt and Gergitsan because I did also enter standard, and to the people that helped me with standard and V Primo, thank you all as well. Thank you to the Peels crew that are part of my Discord for just being there for me and supporting me all the way through. You guys are freaking amazing, so thank you so much for being there. Thank you also Derp. He helped me also a lot, even understanding that Gwendios matchup as a Steam Maiden player, so thank you so much as well. And also want to thank you to everybody that I met during both days. I met a lot of people during both days. I had some amazing, beautiful words said to me, and I'm still they're still rolling back in my head of all these very sweet things that people told me about my content, about who I am, just talking to me about like how much my content, what I do, has helped them. So this is to you. Thank you so much for everything you said. Don't worry, your words are not going to waste. I remember everything that people tell me when it comes to this kind of stuff. Thank the staff real quick, and pretty much everyone at BCS. Overall, the event went really smoothly. There was a couple hiccups, but overall it was a pretty smooth event, and just want to thank the staff. They're really awesome, really nice. The sleeving rules were very well done. Like there was just there was a lot less problems that we had to deal with as people that were entering the event versus Springfest, and overall just a better overall user experience. So thank you guys for that. But otherwise, go ahead and get into deck profile. I know that's why you're here. Let's discuss Steam Maidens, break down some stuff, and kind of go over why this deck is as good as it really is right now. So let's go do that. All right, so here I am. Usual traditions deck box. I use this as my deck box. Talked about this deck box before. I actually made a video on these deck boxes. This is Dank Ritual deck boxes that pretty much do the whole opening thing. Very awesome. You can fit a bunch of stuff. And then for the sleeves, I actually changed them last minute to UU sleeves because I got this mat at the event and I wanted to match it. This was the closest I could find to match. I got this Love is War Kaguya mat, and it's very amazing. It's actually a Japanese imported mat, and it was just very awesome. I'm glad to have it. But anyway, so I switched to the UU sleeves just to kind of match red with the theme that I had going on. I originally had the Cat Vanguard Zero sleeves on here, but decided to switch them out. First, I'm going to reveal the boss unit, and then we'll go up on everything else. So this is the grade 3, pretty much the powerhouse of this kind of engine we got going on here. Let me switch my SPs just because I feel like it. But anyway, I'm going to butcher these names like crazy because they're almost exactly the same. But this is Steam Maiden Elu. This is the main like boss unit, like the main thing you want to see, the main thing you want to do all your stuff with. She has a couple skills. You can bind a card from your drop zone to then call a Steam Maiden card and its card name from your bind zone to rear. This is very effective. It's free. There's no cost on it. Like the cost is just binding a card from your drop, so you do have to have a drop for it. In some situations, this can be kind of scary. If you face decks that come on, they kind of stop you from doing stuff. But outside of a decks that come on, usually it's pretty free. And then there's a couple other skills. At the end of the battle that your rearguard Steam Maiden is attacked, you can actually bind that unit and call another unit with a grade higher, and you can countercharge if it's a grade 1. So it's not a very important skill as it extends your attacks essentially. And it's just a final skill where on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle she gains a ton of power. On Rearguard she gets 1k for everything bound. On Vanguard she gets 3k for everything bound, essentially becoming a little skull dragon on Vanguard. Is probably, in my opinion, one of the strongest part of this deck because the multi-attacking is really important, but the fact that the grade 3 herself can actually hit over pretty much all defenses on Vanguard, and in some cases can hit over defenses on Rearguard, is actually just insane. And then we got some more stuff that made these boosts and power-ups even stronger now, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's pretty much the grade 3. She gets a force marker. You kind of do some crazy stuff with her. She's the beginning of just how aggressive and obnoxious and ridiculous this deck gets. Also, before we switch over to any other grade 3s, copies. I do run 4 of the retroactive teammate in Uru. Most people run this at 3. I put it at 4. The reason I put it at 4 is because this is just such an easy way to fix your bind zone in case your bind zone gets ripped, in case your drop zone just isn't that great, or in case you just want a bigger bind. Also, she is really amazing if you happen to drive check heals. It literally doesn't punish you if you drive check heals and you don't heal. You can also just use the heals to then discard them and then run and then bind this card and then give yourself 25k shield. I cannot express enough the amount of matches I've had where this card saved me. I will mainly note the Gurgit matchups. I actually happened to face 3 gold paladins. I faced 3 gold paladins on the day when I entered rounds. And by the way, I think I forgot to mention this, but I went undefeated in Swiss rounds. Like there was 8 rounds total, and I won every single match. So just something to note. So it was kind of a crazy experience. I didn't think I was gonna go undefeated, but I did go undefeated, and it was actually just nuts. Every game was pretty fire, with the exception of one because the person I faced whiffed a little bit. But anyway, so this card saved me from losing. First round was actually a Gurgit player, which is actually Wolf. It was actually my teammate for Springfest when we topped in Chicago last time. I faced him round 1, and he had like 13 attacks on his first grade 3 ride. It was actually just insane. I happened to have 2 copies of this in my hand, and it literally saved me. It was just enough to outguard his stuff. He did hit a front on top of that. It was a very brutal thing. I almost died to him actually, and I just barely survived because I had these in hand. Another match I want to note is actually Overlord. I faced 2 Overlords, and against those decks, this card came in super clutch. I happened to drive check a couple of these early on, literally saved me the game because just throwing this down, I was able to 2 to pass most of the Vanguard swings and not just pretty much get destroyed by Overlord restanding 3 times. So surprisingly enough, I'm very happy I kept this at 4 because if had this been a Colossus or a Revenant or a grade 2 or anything else, I think I would have died in maybe 1 or 2 of my matchups because I wouldn't have seen this in time. So pretty much I'm running this, and I don't know if I explained the skill, but pretty much on guard circle you can choose a card from your drop, and you choose a card from your drop, and you can put it to the bottom of the deck where you can bind it, and she gets 25k shield. So this is 100k of shields that is in your deck pretty much all the time. You can't search this out, sadly. So that's kind of the downside. You have to just hard draw to it. However, this is also really useful for Stride Fathers. So because it's a grade 4, it counts as a grade 3 or greater. So if you're playing Lost Gear Dog, this card is amazing. Helps you kind of have a consistency. So instead of like pitching these, if you don't want to pitch these and you want to ride them, you can use these. You can pitch these. If you have a heal in hand, it's perfect because then you could still use these cards because it does have the second skill. When your Vanguard is attacked, you can discard a heal trigger and you can call this card to guard circle, and then it'll instantly bind at the end. It always binds at the end of your guard, by the way. So just keep that in mind. You can, once you use 1, it's pretty much out unless you can get it out through her skill, which you can do, by the way. You can go up to grade 4 in this deck, and that's actually another reason why I run this card at 4 cards, which is my next point I'm going into. This card can access you to go to a grade 4, so you can go from a train of 1, 2, 3 until you're 4. This could be your 4. This is a 25k beater on a force marker. Put it behind your gear cat, and suddenly this gets even higher. So it's another thing. Sometimes you want to time leap a certain way. You can time leap multiple ways, but one of the good ways to time leap is 1 to 4, as the numbers are just better. Something Sakib actually told me that to just prioritize if for lethal. If you want to go for lethal, usually it's good to go from 1 to 4. First, let's talk about Revenant Winged Dragon, a very insane card. We run it at 2 copies. Maybe if something ever happens to Colossus, we'll up this card, because I will say this card definitely helps in some really bad and tough situations. This card says Vanguard rear guard once per turn, you can Soul Blast, bind 2 of your rear guards, look at top 3, call 2, bind 1, essentially. So this card is very mandatory in like Mystery Flare type of decks and all that kind of stuff, but it actually works really well in Steam Maidens. They used to be a staple until we got some better cards, essentially. But pretty much this card helps you unbrick. It helps you find stuff. It also helps increase your bind. It pretty much, there's been so many situations where I'm like, oh no, I can't do anything. I'm kind of just stuck. And then I call this card and suddenly I can do stuff again. Sometimes you see triggers, it kind of feels bad, but whatever, like you're digging through your deck more, you're seeing more of your pieces, like you're getting closer to your win con. Maybe you'll top deck Colossus, which is the piano that everybody talks about a lot. There's so many things that this card can offer you. Sometimes you want to see these in your bind zone, and you see these. There's a lot of stuff you want to see in your bind zone, and most of the time this card will find it for you. It won't always happen, but literally probably 9 out of 10 times you activate, you'll probably see at least one piece that you need. Maybe not all 3, but at least one piece you'll see that you need, and this card definitely helps you with that. It also, like I said, propels your bind zone. There's a card in this deck that literally gains power. Aside from this one, there's another card in your deck that literally gains power for every card in your bind. With that being said, there's 2 cards that do this in this deck now, so the higher bind zone, the better it is, and this gives you a +3 bind, essentially, with full effects. So very awesome card. I wish I could play this set more. I will say the Soul Blast can be a little costly in this deck, but it's not the end of the world. 9 out of 10 times you can use it. If you can, usually this card is very useful when you look at your hand and you know your hand is absolute dog crap, like in those situations, sometimes it's good to search for this and just instantly try to soap blast and bind as soon as possible. You'd be surprised the amount of times that this card just saves you games. It's a very big early game call they have to make though, because usually you'll search this out with Lost Gear Dog 8 unless you draw into it. And if you're going to search this out with Lost Gear Dog 8, you need to make a decision right then and there that you're going to commit to this card. If you don't commit to it, you're kind of you wasted a Lost Gear Dog search, because you could search Colossus instead or whatever, or you know, like a ride target, you know, you could just search for ride target, whatever else. You chose to search this, you got to kind of commit to it. So usually early on, if you could just know for a fact that you're bricking, this is the best way to unbrick essentially. This is Mellow Amusements Colossus. It's PTSD card right now. Like literally everyone and their mom hates this card with a burning passion. I don't disagree. I will say in the current deck that this card is definitely a problem. The skill says when placed on rear guard circle, you can buy a card from your hand, and then till end of turn your opponent has to grab 2 cards or more, and this till end of turn, so it's a battle door skill till end of turn. So pretty much your opponent has to grab 2 cards. By the way, you start off with very small numbers, which means your opponent has to overguard or they have to take it. So defenses don't exactly help this situation because their early attacks will still just barely hit over their magic numbers, where it's just enough to where it's really obnoxious guard. Overall, this card is definitely a problem. It'll probably be banned. I would be surprised if this card lasts too much longer. Some people run it at 2. I actually run it at 1. I've had no issues with that 1. I think I used it every single game, and actually I'll set up for 2 turns in a row. I'll usually use this early, not caring, and then I will reset it up again for my next turn. So usually both the turns that I'm on grade, if I'm on grade 3 for 2 turns, both turns will usually have the battle door effect on them. So I usually just I just never stop applying pressure to my opponent. I constantly will just reset this up for my opponent. It might be not as aggressive because usually I'll bring this out through bind, but I will always set this up and I never have issues. And I just think it's kind of a brick if you have like 2 of these, and it is kind of heavy. Sometimes you don't want to go into this instantly, but for the most part you always want to use it once, and if you just want to be super daring like me, you'll use it twice. But for the most part, I'll definitely use it at least once, and then sometimes I'll hold off, but usually I'll use it twice. It's pretty much your win con. You search it with Gear Dog 8, and sometimes you just need to see it as soon as possible. There's some games where if you're pushed too far, you kind of have to go into it. Let's go talk about our grade 2s. So first we're gonna start with the old Steam Maiden. This is Alu. So this card's very simple. This card also hates me. She didn't like being seen. Like most of my games, I kept having trouble fighting her. Anyway, this is Elu. Pretty much, she has 2 skills. When she's bound from the bind zone, you can bind a card, and she gets 3k power for every grade of the cost that you bound it for. So if it's a grade 1, she gets 3k. It's a grade 2, it's 6k, and so on and so forth. Usually you want to bind a grade 3 or a 4 if you're really feeling daring, and she just gets really massive. She usually hits over defenses. Very good card. She also sets up your bind zone, which is amazing. So this is exactly what you want. If you find one of these, you instantly pretty much can set up your bind zone really fast. And then she has another skill. Says the thing about she attack, you can counterblast binder and call a grade 3 from your bind zone to rear. And by the way, it's not restricted to specifically Steam Maiden grade 3. You can actually call any grade 3. So you can call Colossus, you could call Revenant, you could call Elu, you can call whatever you want, honestly, as long as it's a grade 3. So that really sets up that turn 2 Colossus play. I mean the 2 turn Colossus play I was talking about. So you can go from her into this and then use his skills since rear guard circle and then bind a card and then put the guard strict active. You can actually start your turn this way. You can just literally just call her from hand and then swing with her and then use her skill to go into this and then instantly go into the guard restrict and then start looping on the other side. So that way you lose 2 attacks with it, but you still get it going. Like, and then your other side will be looping with the guard restrict already active, and your opponent's at 5. They're guarding everything anyway, so they'll just die there. So a very amazing card. That's pretty much your 2. Let's go into some more 2s. So let's talk about the broken 2 that everybody loves and hates at the same time. This is Steam Maiden. I don't know how to say her name, but Etrahana, we'll just call her. I'll just call her Entra for short. But yeah, this is Entra. Pretty much she has a couple skills. She says, when placed in Vanguard, rear guard circle can counterblast and search for Gear Cat. I'll show you guys what Gear Cat looks like, but we'll talk about it in a little bit here. But this is Gear Cat. I actually named my deck log after this Gear Cat. I named it Kitty Cat as my best friend. Card with it works insanely well. So pretty much you have to call it to the same column as with the search. So when you search it, you have to call it to the same column. Something to keep in mind. This is really important for setup. You can't, if you already have something here, you have to. So if you have something here, you have to call over it and call the Gear Cat here. Otherwise, you just can't call it. It just doesn't work that way. So something to keep in mind. She has another skill though. Her secondary skill says at the end of the battle that she attacked while boosted. Something to keep in mind. She has to be boosted. You can soap blast, reveal the top 2 cards, choose 1 card to hand, 1 card to bind. Essentially, this is super clutch. Sometimes it helps you find shield, helps you find pieces, helps you bind pieces. It's a very amazing engine actually. Last but not least, I have 2 Nabus for the grade 2 lineup. Now most people will ask me why they run up 2 Nabus. Most run 3 3. I cut it back to 2. I cut back to 2 actually for the grade 4. That's where I cut back. I just found over time that for the most part, while this card is useful, don't get me wrong, it's a guard restrict, it's useful. Sometimes it actually just gets in the way because usually your perfect scenario column is you'll have this and a cat somewhere, and then you'll be looping on this side when you're on Vanguard. So typically your turn, usually your turn when you're trying to like do some insane stuff, like when you're pretty much trying to like start a turn, it'll usually look something like this. Like this will usually be what it looks like, right? So Nabu only really comes in handy the turn before this, but on this turn, usually this is how your turn looks. Sometimes this will be a heal and you'll have a force marker behind this specific column, right? So because your turn usually looks like this, there's really no room for Nabu unless she's already binded and you can actually time leap from this into this, right? But which does happen and sometimes it's very useful, but for the most part, you won't have room to actually call her out. In most situations, she won't come up unless it's on your first turn. When you're on grade 2, then you will use her, and you can use her twice if you want, you know, do whatever, but that's the only time she'll really come in handy. But for the most part, because I found that the timing is so awkward with her, I found that there was no point in me running this card at more than 2 copies. Now some might argue with me that 3 is just mandatory. I think it's just up to you and up to your preferences. I just found that over time this card became less and less useful. Not bad, just not that useful. You will never use this or rarely use this on your grade 3 turn for lethal, even under a guard restrict or whatever. Like if you have the guard restrict of the piano and the guard restrict of this, you probably won't be using it because you have better options to go into. You usually want to keep going up. You can't go up from the 2 to a 3. You can only use the Vanguard skill to do that, and if you're doing that, that means you're losing out on calling out your heal or calling out a grade 4, and that's a big feels bad, and all you're doing is they're rolling attacks all because you want to do this instead. So it's usually not worth it. However, this card's really good early on. This is like one of the best cards to have early on, but like I said, you'll maybe get one off a game, like maybe one. Like you'll get one off on turn 2. You'll have your Entra on the other side doing her thing with the Soul Blast skill. My favorite thing is actually going from Entra, Soul Blasting the grade 1 that I rode, and then using Nabu's skill to bind the grade 1 to set up my grade 1 bind in my bind zones. That's usually the best scenario. But overall, like I said, this card's not that crazy in my opinion, specifically Maidens. I think this card has better roles in other Gear Chronicle decks. I just think she's just average in this deck. It's kind of crazy to say that this card's average because it's actually a very strong card. This right here is Elu? I don't freaking know. This is the grade 1 Steam Maiden girl. Your main ride target essentially. She is pretty bonkers. She has a lot of really good skills. To talk about her first one, Vanguard skill, you can Soul Blast bind a grade 2 or less and draw a card. If you bind a trigger, you draw another card. So very useful. Usually want to bind the heal trigger that says Steam Maiden on it. Sometimes you'll bind a crit trigger just because that's just how it is, but you still draw a card, so you still fix it a little bit. Helps you dig through your deck. It essentially, you draw for turn and then you draw 2 more cards. So it's actually really nuts. This is an insanely good card. She does have a second skill. Her skill is the exact same to the grade 2 version, but you call grade 2 instead of a grade 3. Literally says the other battle she attacked, you can counterblast, bind her, call 2. You don't have to call specifically a Steam Maiden 2. You can call stuff like this instead. You can call Entra off of her if you really want to. You can call pretty much any grade 2 in your deck off of it if you just really want to do that. And it depends on the situation, depends on the setup. Things do change. There's variance from game to game, but that's pretty much what this card does. You definitely want to see this as your right target. It's probably your best right target, and yeah, you gotta be very careful with the binds sometimes, and even with the soul. Sometimes you don't want to use the soul. As strange as it sounds, there's actually one game where I didn't use the soul because my hand was just so bad and I had like nothing that was I had all rides, but I had no good rides. So I actually kept the soul so I could dig further with Revenant and stuff like that, and it worked. I got everything I needed and I won the game off of it. So sometimes on a very rare occasion you may not want to actually use it. The soul can be actually very important, especially if you don't have Nabu. So other than that, like overall good card. I don't recommend doing that play, by the way. It was a very rare one-off situation that I had where I was like, well, I need soul, so I'm going to just hold on to using my soul here, and somehow I got everything I needed and it was great. Lost Gear Dog 8. Now a lot of people run this at 3. I'm not really sure why. I think this is a mandatory 4 of. You can cut back, like, yes, I agree, but I honestly don't see a reason to. You have special win cons. There's actually several win cons you need. One of which you need to see this. Like, you just need to see this card. You'd be surprised, but sometimes you just don't see this card. And if you don't see this card, you you do absolutely nothing in this deck. You really need to see this card. The other thing is, now here comes the other crazy part, you actually need to see a second copy of this card. You'd be surprised, but if you don't see a second copy of this card, you will also have a struggle time. You'll struggle doing what you need to do on your grade 3 turn. Last but not least, sometimes you even need a third copy of this card because you need to ride as well. This deck, when it doesn't ride, it is actually very bad. The riding is so important that sometimes it's hard to say like if it's worth to even go time leap into her because of how badly it is to have 2 force markers. So that being said, sometimes you really need to see all 4 copies of this card, and because of that you need this card at 4 because this is a direct search. Now I'm just talking about this card, don't forget about the homie. You need to see this card too. This card literally helps you on brick. And last but not least, you need to see your other win con, because you can actually win to several ways. You can win by having these on your board, like just, you know, like as your last time leapers, and you'll have like really big numbers on your vanguard and rears. Or you can win con with this too. This is your other win con. You can technically even have both if you want to, but because you need to see this also, you need to see Gear Dog, and to see Gear Dog you need to run it at 4. Last but not least, let's talk about Kitty Cat. I brought up Kitty Cat earlier. This is Gear Cat. Gear Cat is very powerful. It says when placed on vanguard or rearguard circle, you can look at top 3, get by Steam and put the rest at the bottom. And then for when it boosts, for every card in your bind zone gets 1k, so this has the same conditions as the grade 3. The main part is definitely the grade 1. This is a when placed skill, so you can do it anywhere. You can do it from bind, you can do it from you can do it off of Revenant Dragon, which is insane half the time. Sometimes if you don't have a grade 1, you can actually go from the heal into this and the search that way if you want, just for extra search, extra booster, extra whatever. So it's really rare when this comes up, but sometimes you don't have a grade 1 but you want an attacker, you want to be able to deco, you want to go through your deck a little bit more. This is one of the best ways to do it. This card is actually saying this helps. This card lets you be greedy with mulligans like crazy. This card and this card both help you let you be greedy with mulligans. It can be super greedy for your certain pieces, just because these 2 cards exist. This searches, a couple other cards kind of search too, and kind of like Nabu lets you draw and all this kind of stuff. So because of that, like, you really want to maximize on this as much as possible. This is definitely like an insanely good card. So you'll miss sometimes, and actually sometimes you'll miss every single Gear Cat, but for the most part you'll at least hit something, and it will just help you. It will just help you in the run. And yeah, it's a cat, and I love cats, so I'm very happy with this card. I'm very happy it exists. Part of the reason why I actually play this deck is because I just really like cats, and I saw that there was a cat as a main grade 1 that you just get to see all the time, and it's just really happy when I'm searching and I'm like, I call my Gear Cat, use skill. I just like doing that because I like cats, so this makes me super happy. Let's go ahead and talk about triggers. So you want to run the Steamated Uru. Now some people will argue that you can do a 3-1 split. This could be a heal guardian. I don't disagree. I chose to go the resource routes, so because of, let me find the card. So because of this card and consistency, I chose to actually run 4 of the regular ones over the heal guardians. I agree that it gives you, if you do like a 3-1 split, it gives you more search targets for Gear Dog as well, which I totally understand. Also against some certain rush or certain decks where you know you can get rush down. I personally did not think I would see any rush down decks or any decks that could rush me down. It's kind of funny that I say that because I did get actually rushed down at top 8, but we'll get to that later. But anyway, for the most part, this heal guards are really good against Excel decks that rush you down like crazy. So Aquaforce, if they play the rush down builds, or Astro Poets, where they have really crazy crits. Apparently Lupina Melody is on this list. I had to add Lupina Melody to this list because that's actually what killed me. I had no ways of guard, because actually in that game in particular, I didn't have a single heal in hand. They were all in deck, so even if I had one heal guardian, I wasn't saved. I didn't see Gear Cat, I didn't see Gear Dog that game either, so that wouldn't have helped me either. I wouldn't have survived either way, so it really didn't matter. However, sometimes searching for a heal guardian is useful. I didn't think I was going to see it in my matchups to where it would have mattered, and actually my matchups were fine. It didn't matter, and against mirror matches, 20k shields that are zeros are just nicer, just even if they Nabu you. If they Nabu you, you have ways to go around the Nabu, like just by having the you know, the shield to kind of deal with this, since you can't do grade 1s or greater. But the other part is the consistency for this card is just very important. Having 4 of these gives you access to hit this faster. You'd prefer to mine this over anything else. And the other thing is it also helps you not brick. There are so many situations where you won't have the 0 and you're kind of stuck to where you can't countercharge, and it's really awkward, and it has to be a Steam Maiden unless you call trigger from hand in order to time leap, and it's just kind of weird. You kind of want these as like your main, you want these to complete your engine for the Steam Maiden time weaving. So running it like as a 3-1 split can be kind of weird. You do go through your deck quite a bit, but it's hard. I personally agree for both situations. I think having 3-1 or 4 is fine either way. I think meta calls are a big thing for this one. If you really think you're gonna get rushed down or really think you're gonna get beat down like crazy, get the heal guardian, put it in, put it at 1. I don't recommend putting it more than 1. If you really need to go 2-2 split, you can, but I don't recommend it. I actually can't remember which one of the more recent locals I went to, but there was the locals I went to where I actually had these at the 2-2 split, and I still won. I still saw my 0 Uru. I got really lucky, I guess, but it was just because I just didn't have the other 2 at the time, and I was fine. But you know, when you don't hit it, you just kind of are stuck. It lowers your counter charging, all that kind of stuff. So it's a little weird, but you know, it's up to you. I think it's a meta call. Crits, so I went the 8 crits, but then in my sentinels I actually added a 9th crit. You might be asking yourself why. You could have just stuck with the perfect guards. Strangely enough, 30k shield is just insanely high. Like insanely high. 30k shield is just really good. You'd be surprised. Again, I'm gonna bring up the Overlord matchup, but this against the Overlord matchup was like brilliant. They go 23. I plop this down. It's already at 2 to pass. And, you know, perfect guards are worse because you have to drop 2 cards. You need every card possible against Overlord matchups because they're gonna go so heavy on you with the restance, and then they get force markers on top of that. And it's just a really hard matchup overall if you're going second. And by the way, I'm pretty sure both games that I faced Overlord, I went second, which was really hard to deal with. And I won both games, and it was, like I said, it was really close. It was down to like a 1 card difference, and I was able to just have enough guard both times to survive and do my thing. So yeah, overall it's a pretty rough matchup. It can be very scary, and yeah, just having this 30k shield is really nice. Again, against mirror matches, if they try to Naboo you, you can drop this card instead, and it's great because it's just 30k shield. Whereas if you were, say you have a perfect guard in hand, now you have to perfect guard and pitch for like a 15 to 25k attacker where you could have just used this card instead. Now there's another reason for this. This is really good for just straight up killing your opponent as fast as possible. While usually your opponent will say no guard to your Vanguard because the number is too high. They'll either no guard it or they'll perfect guard it. That's really the only 2 options they have. They will never hard pass it because usually it'll be too high unless the number is super like 26 or something. It'll usually be too high to where they won't 2 to pass it. So that being said, if they say no guard and they're 3 damage, you can easily just go crit and end the game there. I would even argue you can probably go 2-2 if you want, but I think you do need a perfect guard in some matchups, specifically Fromage. And because of Fromage and decks like Fromage, I actually chose to keep the 3. Fromage is very scary. You do need at least 1 perfect guard against that deck. The deck isn't like impossible to beat or anything like that, but you do need like some really good hard early guard, and then you need at least 1 perfect guard to kind of be safe. And because this is a force deck, we don't have, I'm not playing Protect like I normally am, so I don't have access to just perfect guards normally. So you really want to at least find 1. It'll make that matchup a lot easier. You can always PG the Vanguard and then hard guard the rear guards, and then you'll be fine. Another reason is actually the Glendios matchup. Glendios is actually a really hard matchup into Steam Maidens, especially if they high roll early for locking. If they hire early for locking, I think what they can do is they can essentially lock you out from both sides, so only your Vanguard can swing. If that happens, you will usually lose the game. You can outplay it early on, but it's really hard, and you have to be in very specific, you have to put yourself in a very specific situation, and you're forced to call a lot of cards from hand early in order to go around the Glendios matchup. And if they high roll into their stuff and if they go first, you kind of are already at a huge disadvantage, and you are on a huge ticking clock. And because of that, you can die randomly because to that deck. So if they lock you out and then they keep omega locking you after that, you will literally not be able to play the game. Your Vanguard will be doing nothing. Your rear guards will be very stuck. You will never unlock your front row, and you will just eventually lose. Made it a little bit easier to see. So that's that. And then of course you want your starter. There's the starter. Force 1 or Force 2 questions. Definitely Force 1. I did bring Force 2 with me on the off chance that I may randomly never need it. You definitely always want to go Force 1. There's almost never a reason to go Force 2. Your numbers are too small. There's just never a reason to go Force 2. You pretty much always want to go Force 1. Your numbers just literally won't hit if you go Force 2. You usually need to rewrite at least once, so you will usually always need 2 force markers at all times per game. Essentially, if you get to 3, you pretty much probably already won the game. 3 force markers is pretty much just death, almost unguardable. Your opponent is just crying if they see you right a 3rd time. Yeah, let's talk about, I may just make my rounds into a separate video, or maybe I'll do it as a stream now that I'm discussing this now. I don't think I'll have time to talk about rounds today. However, I can tell you what my rounds were. Pretty much the rounds I faced was Gurgit, Ezel, Overlord, Angelander, Overlord, Steam Maidens, Gurgit, Steam Maidens. Those were the matchups I faced in Swiss rounds, and then top 8 I died to Lapina Melodies. That was my full run for BCS for top 8. Let's go ahead and talk about some really quick like decision making that you have to make. Early on is be very careful about guard, and then later on when you're setting up your bind zone, you kind of have a couple like options, I guess is the best way to put it. Choices are usually around this. So this is usually sort of, and sometimes you have this in here too. It's not very necessary, but sometimes you have that too. The most ideal bind zone for lethal is this, and Colossus for game. This is usually ideal, going from 1 to 4. You'll go from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and then 3, you'll use her scale to go to the 4. So you don't countercharge. This is just a 3, 1 counterblast, 2 counterblast, and then this will be free. So 2 CB, and then you'll go into this, and you just try to kill here. She becomes 25k shield. It's great. So this is the perfect setup for pretty much just going for a onslaught approach. This will be 18, 29, whatever number your bind zone is, 25 on under, and then 15. And then this is under force markers. So this is under force markers. So this will be 25. And then your cat will be boosting all of these, or will be boosting, and then your cat will be boosting the 3rd or the 4th one, or maybe you can boost the 2nd one, you know, whatever if they have defense is somewhere, you might have to boost early. So for kill potential, you want to go this, and you want to do this twice actually on both sides. You can set up a 1 on both sides, and you can loop it this way, and one side won't have the 4, one side will, but you'll end game that way. If you want to go for the more resource approach, or the more like not as counterblast heavy approach, then this is the more traditional approach right here. So 0 to 3 combo. You go this, you use her skill to go into the 1, and then you go from 1, use a skill to go 2, and then for 2, use a skill go to the 3. This is the other combo you can do. This is very standard combo, very normal combo. This is just normal. Now sometimes you can change out some of these ratios here, so you can go from this into this. Then, as I discussed earlier about Colossus, you can go from this into this. Keep in mind this does bind a card from your drop zone, so you can bind a 3 to set up for the 3 you want to go into. So you can do something like this. And then another thing you can do, let's talk about kind of the 2s. So if you're boosted on grade 1, you can actually go into Entra and then use Entra's skill to get yourself another kitty cat, and then you reset up your board essentially. Like you can boost on this or boost on this even, and then not boost on this, and then go into this, and then now you have this. This helps a lot if you want to set up, you know, a more farming turn, and just, you know, you get a card off of this, and you'll get a card off of that. Well, you'll get a mandatory card out of this. You'll get a maybe card out of this. So this is another setup you can do. Another farming card that you can go into is this. This is an amazing also secondary card. You can go from the 1 to this if you want to. Also very useful. And this is another option. You can do another farming approach. It's very small, as you can tell. There's only really 2 attacks going on here, but you can it will be free on counterblast because this will countercharge it back for you. But yeah, you can essentially go from this to kitty cat as well if you want to do that. I remember one time I did this and someone read my card like 3 times to make sure that this was actually legitimate, but it is very legitimate. It does state grade 1, does not say which grade 1. So it's something you can do as well. When you're guarding, you always want to keep at least one of these in hand, because essentially what you're going to do is when your turn starts, so typically what you normally do is you use her skill, bind something, and if you're going for lethal, you have to have 4 open damage, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 open damage. And pretty much what happens here is you use her skill, bind a card, call this grade 1 out. Now, if you want to loop on both sides, you call the other one that you saved from hand. And now you can go full combo on both sides. So you can go from 1 to 2 to 3, and then you can choose which side gets the 4. It does require 4 CB, but you'd be surprised how easy it is to maintain this. If you put this under Colossus, it's pretty much game. If you have a force marker on each side, it's guaranteed game pretty much. And like usually the most ideal lethal situation, like the best situation you can put yourself in, is definitely something like this. 4 open counterblasts, double grade 1s, Colossus under it, 2 card guard restrict, 2 card guard restrict, go into your 2s, 2 card guard restrict, go into your 3s, 2 card guard restrict, go into one of your 4s, 2 card guard restrict. Vanguard is still swinging, by the way. It just gets insane. This is probably the biggest and best lethal situation you can put yourself in. It's definitely the way to kill. Your opponent usually, and I say usually because, you know, weird shit can happen, but they should die. Sometimes you'll be left with one of these on the board, and then on the other side, you know, you can call the 1 and kind of do that if you want. You can call the 1 and do something, and then leap this to a 4, or you can start on the 0 even. You can even start on the 0, leap this. Actually, no, you can't start on the 0. You have to start on the 1. So you can go from the 1 to the 3 and then leap to the 4 on this side, if you can do it like that. Some people do some fancy stuff where they boost on one side and then they time leap into something else and then go on this side. Some people do some weird stuff like that to utilize, like if they don't call something. For the most part, my favorite setup by far is definitely having something like this. This is my favorite setup on the planet. It's such a good farming setup. You pretty much loop on one side, use a total of pretty much 1 counterblast, because, or max 2. You loop on this side, and then you use your resources on this side to then soul blast and look at, you know, your top 2 cards, and then, you know, bind one, bring one to hand, or whatever you want to do. I think the setup's just so insanely good, and it just sets up so much. And yeah, so that pretty much is like the setup stuff. Early on, you really have to be cautious of how you guard. Keep in mind, we're talking about the setup the bind zone, but you have to have a bind zone in order to actually do something, right? So you want to always keep track of how you're binding, what you're guarding with, what you're using. It's insanely important. But overall, this deck's insanely strong. There's a reason why people are playing it. I've had this deck since the release of the new stuff. I had the old stuff, and then I bought the new stuff. I was going to take it to Georgia, but I chickened out because I didn't think I had enough knowledge to take the to take this deck. Because I will say something about this deck, though a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, this deck is so strong, blah blah blah. This deck does require quite a lot of piloting and a lot of experimenting and a lot of testing. There are certain situations that you may not even think that could come up. So if you do plan on picking this deck up, you want to take it to an event, I highly recommend testing it. If you are someone that thinks that you can just pick it up and win with it, don't recommend that. I do highly recommend testing this, especially the mirror match. Mirror matches are very important. You will see a mirror match, especially while this deck is unbanned. With that being said, I'm getting the video here. I'm already at almost an hour, and holy crap, and like I didn't even go over like how the stuff I wanted to go over. Hope you guys enjoyed the deck profile. Hope it helps you. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them below. If you want to join the Discord, please feel free to do that. If you want to shop at 50 cards for any cards that you need, including these cards right here, please feel free to do that. For all the things you need, you can use my code ORANGE to get anything that you need from there. So please feel free to do that. It'll be in your benefit, and also help me, and it'll help the boy that's running the store. So you can do that as well. So feel free. Orange, he's doing some crazy deals right now, so don't forget about his deals. Again, if you have any questions, please leave them below. Or you can tweet me, you can @ me, you can go on my Discord, you can DM me in there, you can message me on Twitter, you can message me on Facebook. I don't know, but if you have questions, I'm always here to help you. I've already gotten a lot of questions about this deck, and I'm happy that more people are asking me questions. I'm always here to help. This is pretty much a new meta for most people in V Premium. You know, we just went from Prism for 3 years into this, so it is definitely a shift in the direction. A lot of people have no idea how to fight this, so I'm always here to help and do whatever I can to assist you. So with that, guys, peace out. Let's be out here. See you guys next time, and yeah, bye. Catch you in another video.